Hello, everyone. Welcome tonight, and thank you for joining me. Sunday night, February 22nd, 8 p.m. Mountain Time. I would like to welcome you here, and just by way of thank you, I guess, a lot of you have sent me in stories. In fact, I'm struggling to get through all of them as they're coming to me, but I really want you to keep sending me those stories. If there's something I know and I believe to be true, it is that among the people of God, the gifts of the Spirit are plentiful. They're everywhere, for everyone. Even though sometimes we may not recognize it, we are receiving blessings from the Lord and gifts of the Spirit. Well, many times those result in stories that are appropriate to share. And do you realize when you send me your story, your faith-promoting story, either that or you of yourself or your ancestor, well, you're strengthening someone else's faith. That's what these stories do. Especially, I would like to ask you, and I'll repeat this more later on, but if you have stories related to family history and temple work that are appropriate to share, and the assistance of angels in that work, please send those to me. I would like to read them, and I would like to do something with them, to publish them if I may. Anyway, thank you. And also to all of the VIPs. The only way that this thing carries on is by the sale of books and by the support of the VIPs. Now, they're the only ones that pay anything into this other than someone who buys a book. And I would like to say thank you to all of the VIPs for your financial support. Tonight I have 7 stories, but in order for this to work, well, I need your faith and prayers. First story. And again, there's 2 or 3 that are personal stories tonight, so I hope you don't mind. One spring morning, more than 40 years past, I was dressed in a shirt and tie and pedaling a bicycle to Idaho State University campus in Pocatello. It was about a 5-mile ride from my country apartment. Where was I going on that early spring morning? Well, it was finals week at the university, and I was all dressed up to deliver my final oration in my speech class. I was all prepared. I was ready to go. Well, I was about 2/3 of the way down to the campus, riding down 4th Avenue, when all of a sudden a lady came through an intersection in her car and crossed over 4th. Me going this way, her coming this way. She didn't see me. The sun was in her eyes, but I saw her, and I stood up on that bike to pedal for all I was worth. I didn't make it. She clipped the back end of my bike. Now, I don't know what happened. I can't wait to see the video on the other side of the veil. But evidently, I went up in the air and came down face first into the asphalt and slid. The next thing I remembered was crawling on my hands and knees out of the intersection and sitting down and leaning against the wooden stop sign. The poor lady came out, and oh, she felt terrible because I was a mess. The ambulance came and took me to the hospital, and I was propped up in a chair in the hospital and left sitting there for over an hour waiting on my doctor. While I sat, oh, baby, I developed the worst headache in 6 states. It was awful to the point of debilitating. Well, my doctor finally showed up, and he had a rather rough and abrupt bedside manner. "Well, Glenn, what did you do now?" He examined the damage and determined that he would need a plastic surgeon to put my face back together. I remember lying there on the table awake while these 2 doctors dug the gravel out of my face and sewed me back together. All the while I was there, all I could think about, besides the pain, was that final. Now, I was always a conscientious student. I was not one to ditch class, and I was certainly not one to ditch a final. But what was I going to do? I don't remember, but I got word to the class about what had happened, and I was assured, don't worry, all is going to be well, and I had the well wishes of the class. Well, when it was all over, I went home with my stitches to recover from my injuries. And when I was recovered enough, I went to see that professor to see what could be done. Now, he was a cheerful old chap. He was friendly. But when I asked him about making up the final, his answer was simple. You can't. He then explained that my grade was based on several things. Preparation, yep. Subject, yep. But I had to deliver the speech to the class, and part of my grade was my delivery and their reactions. So of course, there was no way I could make up the final. They'd all gone home for the summer. Well, at that point, I hoped that the prof would take pity on me and give me the A that I had been on track for. But instead, he cheerfully and generously gave me a B for the course and sent me happily on my way. I was furious. I had worked hard. I had done A work in that course, and I walked away with a B. All I could think of to say was, this is unfair. Well, it was. It was unfair. And I was really upset about it for years, maybe even decades, until on a recent morning, decades later, I reflected back on that painful morning that seemed so important at that time. And I came to a powerful realization. It didn't matter. That B did not matter one bit on my journey to eternal progression. In fact, it may have been a favor. Sometimes, and you know this, life is grossly and impossibly unfair, and it hurts abominably in the moment. But I promise you, given enough time, and this is the point, given enough time and faith on the Lord Jesus Christ, He who is full of grace, equity, and truth will make all things right. All things. I got a B. So what? I gained much more than I ever lost in missing that final. Hang on. Hold on. No matter how unfair it is in the moment, keep the faith, and the Master will make it right. Next story. With America 250 coming up, freedom has been on my mind a great deal of late. I cherish it both as a principle and a practice. Hence, I share this story in an effort to hold on to this precious gift. March the 5th, 1770. March 5th, 1770 was a cold, moonlit night in Boston, Massachusetts. Sometime after 9:00 p.m., a mob of about 50 men and boys gathered about a lone British sentry standing guard there at the customs house. Threats and taunts escalated, and soon there were over 100 townspeople and 9 British soldiers in a face-off. Tensions were already high between the Redcoats and the Bostonians over the killing of a young boy just days before. Very soon, rocks and snowballs began to pelt the soldiers, along with cries of, "Kill them!" And what happens next, no one is exactly sure. One soldier was struck and knocked down with a stick. He tried to get up. He was knocked down again. So he fired his musket into the unarmed crowd, as do others of the soldiers. When the melee was over, 5 Boston men lay dead and 6 wounded. Quickly, the story spread and became embellished as the Boston Massacre. Public opinion had been against the British ever since 4,000 redcoats had been stationed there to keep the peace. Boston was only 20,000 people, so that's a lot of soldiers. But with this, the citizens were enraged. The soldiers, of course, were arrested. They were charged with murder. The prosecution was arranged quickly, but no one in Boston would take the soldiers' defense. Can you see the scene? That is until a daring 34-year-old Massachusetts lawyer stepped up. This was not going to be a popular case, and he knew it. It would very likely damage his reputation as well as his law practice. Compounding his worry was his concern for the safety of his expectant wife and young family. In an effort to compose himself, the young attorney sat down and wrote in his diary. Among other things, he copied the following, quote, "If by supporting the rights of mankind and of invincible truth, I shall contribute to save one unfortunate victim of tyranny, well, his blessings and years of transport will be sufficient consolation to me for the contempt of all mankind." End quote. And contempt there would be. There would be 2 trials, one for Captain Thomas Preston and another for the 8 soldiers under his command. In his closing arguments, the young defense attorney said, quote, "Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictum of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence." End quote. Note his statement, the dictum of our passions. Well, it was a flawless and winning argument. In the end, Captain Preston was acquitted, as were 6 of the soldiers. It was not a popular decision, but it was the right one. The Boston Massacre would serve a paradoxical purpose. In the first instance, it would prove a rallying cry against the British, leading up to and a cause of the American Revolution. And in the second, it would prove that the new America would be different than the countries of the world. She would stand upon the rule of law, and the impassioned rule of public opinion would not bear sway. And it would prove that all men have inalienable rights and are equal before the law. By his own reckoning, that young attorney did indeed lose half his practice. It was a difficult time. But he went on to become something, stand for something so much greater. Who was he? John Adams. If justice ever ceases to be blind in America, she will no longer be free. And be careful of the dictum of popular passions. Next story. I shared this with some of you last night. As I have said many times, I was raised on a cattle ranch. I grew up a cowboy with a lifelong cowboy father. Right here, right behind me. And somehow, I don't know why, but I've never been able to outgrow it. A cowboy just became who I am on the deepest level. I don't know why. It's just what I became. Well, maybe it had something to do with this. It's called the Code of the Cowboy. Let me tell you the story of the American cowboy. After the Civil War, markets opened up in the eastern United States, and people in the East developed a taste for Western beef. It became very lucrative, therefore, for large cattle operations in Texas to make up large herds and drive them north up along such trails as the Chisholm or the Goodnight Loving Trail to the railheads in the Midwest. That's where the railroad ran, was through the Midwest. They went to destinations such as Dodge City, Abilene, Ogallala, Nebraska, Cheyenne and Laramie, Wyoming, and many more. Typically, the men who were recruited for these long cattle drives were young and unattached. They came from every race and every age, but they were thrown together for months at a time, driving thousands of head of longhorn cattle over endless miles to the rails. As you can imagine, it was a hard way of life. And out of it came an unwritten, unspoken code of conduct called the Code of the Cowboy. I'd like to explain. These are some of the major points of that law. Again, an unspoken creed of the cowboy. Number 1, a man's word is his bond. Reputation was everything. And in a world where there were very few contracts and even fewer courts of law, the cowboys had to count on each other. A handshake was a binding contract. Can we trust you? Number 2, ride for the brand. Well, what did that mean? That meant loyalty to the outfit. No matter what, the cowboy stood behind those he worked for and would sacrifice everything to protect cattle that didn't even belong to him. Number 3, take care of your horse. I knew this one very well. The cowboy's horse was his livelihood. The cowboy would care for his horse first and himself second. Without that horse, he was useless. Now, what did that translate into? A man without a horse, a man on foot, is only half a man. Well, number 4, help everyone in need. Why? Well, because the range was wide open country. Creature comforts were very few, and there were no 7-Elevens, no Motel 6s, and certainly no Walmarts out there. And so you took care of each other because you never knew when it was you that was going to need help on a cold, dark winter night. It was expected that you took care of each other in times of need. No stranger was turned away from your fire, and no one was sent back empty into the storm. Next one, don't quit and don't complain. It was rough country. It's a hard way of life. And whining, whimpering, and complaining was just not tolerated. It was annoying, and the cowboy wouldn't put up with it. Even today, you'll still hear this phrase, cowboy up. Well, what did that mean? Square your shoulders, endure the hardships stoically, and get the job done. And don't whine. The next one, courageous, but not reckless. Trail driving was dangerous. The work of those young cowboys was always high risk. Storms, rustlers, stampedes, unpredictable horses, bad men. The cowboy never knew what was coming next, and he was expected to face his fear, mount up, and when the time came, get the job done. Face your fear. No bragging, no boasting. Boy, does this one ring home. The cowboys most admired that man who could show up, mount up, and get the job done, not the one who talked about it. Understatement of ordeal. Now, understand what that means. Understatement of suffering and ordeal was considered a virtue. Regardless of race or color, cowboys respected competence and skill. On a storm line, in the middle of a stampede, nobody cared where you were born or what color your skin was. And the last one, and there are many more, but this is the last one I'll list. Get back on. If you get bucked off, you get back on. Don't let that horse beat you. Be tough. Get the job done, no matter the opposition. That was some of the major elements of the code of the cowboy. And the bottom line was, it was all about being able to depend on each other and get done a hard job. The code was not something cowboys discussed. There was no handbook of instructions. It was just lived and expected and communicated by example. Well, by the 1890s, the major trail drives were over. Rails had gone south into Texas. Cattle had been driven north into Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and large ranches had spread all over that country. And they'd been fenced off with barbed wire. And so the days of the wild, drifting cowboy, the single wild cowboy, well, they were replaced by working ranch cowboys, rooted, grounded in place, who raised families and became established members of the community. But the code never died. The code lived on through the 20th century and even into the 21st. It still lives. I was raised with that code. I never knew it. It was bred into me from the time I was just a wee little boy. No one taught it to me. I observed it until it became the code of my conduct that still governs my conscience. It's my creed. It isn't something I do because I like boots or the fashion. No, it's just me. It was something I had to live up to. Well, when I became a member of the church, a disciple of the Lord Jesus Christ, there wasn't anything that the Savior and his prophets taught me that contradicted the code of the cowboy. Instead, it changed the language and reinforced it. The measure of a true man then, in the days of the cowboy, and now, be he cowboy or Christian or both, was this. It can all be summed up by this: strength by restraint and meekness. Next story. I have a confession to make. It's an experience I had, but in making this confession, I don't think I'm the only one. And in telling this story, there's a lesson to be learned. As some of you know, I travel a bit for a living. I am frequently in foreign lands as part of my work, countries where I don't speak the language. I remember an experience of the first time I went to a certain nation in Europe, which will not be named. I was excited to go there. I had heard and read a great deal about this country. Its history was rich. Its culture was wonderful. Well, I arrived in the capital city with my group, and we went in search of something to eat. I found something that suited me, and I stepped up to the cashier to place my order. A young woman came expectantly to receive my order, but when I tried to place that order in English, she became very rude and scornful, and walked away in disgust, making some contemptible comment. Well, I know she spoke my language. That was evident. But because I did not speak hers and didn't know how, well, she was deeply offended, and she let me know such. Now, I know that it's a courtesy to speak in the language of the people that you are among, and we try. My wife is currently learning Romanian because of her deep love for that country and people. But sometimes when you're going through 4, 5, or 6 countries in a 2-week span, it's a little tough to learn the language, eh? But sometimes I just can't. This year alone, I will visit 14 different countries. However, my point is not cultural protocols of linguistics. Returning to my experience, I was a little put off by her rudeness, but I gave it not much further thought. until later that day, the next, I can't remember, it happened again. I was rudely rebuffed because I could not speak the language. Now, here's my confession. I left the country a couple of days later. I saw a lot of sights before I left and came away loving the country and its history. But what do you think became my opinion of the people of that nation? Especially when I encountered other travelers of mine who had the same experience. Well, it wasn't good. And hence, there's my confession. I judged a nation by my two experiences. Now, by contrast, I went to another nation in Asia that year, where I found the people in my brief time there the most humble, sweet, and accommodating. And that in spite of the fact that their nation was and still is torn asunder by factions to the point we cannot even safely go there anymore. Those people could not speak my language, and I couldn't even begin to speak theirs. But with the help of Google Translate, we worked through it. Everywhere I went and each encounter I had, I found those people kind, humble, and willing to help. Now, what do you suppose became my opinion of this tiny, war-torn, undemocratic nation? I love them. I love the people. And I can't wait for the time I can return. Now, my point. Every ward and branch of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is like a small country. When a foreigner walks through those doors who is unfamiliar with your ward's unique culture, cliques, and customs, will they be welcomed? How will they be treated? Oh, heaven forbid, what will happen if they sit in the wrong pew for sacrament meeting? Oh, dear. For right or for wrong? If a nation can be and will be judged, if a nation can be judged by one or two people, so too will the Lord's kingdom in your ward. Let's take a break. All I have to say, how are you? How are you doing? I hope you are well. I wanted to say thank you one more time to all of the free subscribers. Those of you that take those weekly emails and send them on to family and friends, thank you. Spread them far and wide. They're not my stories. They belong to you. And their purpose is to carry on the covenant, to transport the covenant over generations and inspire people to be good and follow the Lord. That's all they're for. So, help me. Okay. December 18th, 1846. The Mormon Battalion was marching across Arizona near a place called Tucson Creek. Marching with the battalion was 22-year-old Henry Green Boyle. Early that morning before dawn, Henry's nose had begun to bleed and wouldn't stop around 4 a.m. At the creek, the battalion, after about 7 or 8 hours of marching, filled their canteens and marched on. Except that Henry's messmate had lost his canteen, and so Henry went that day without water. Evidently, the nosebleed stopped, but not before he'd lost a lot of blood. The battalion marched 30 miles across the desert that day. Henry was weak from the loss of blood, and without water. The next day, the battalion started out again and again found no water all that day. Henry recorded, "I traveled nearly all that night, having been left some distance behind. I was weak from loss of blood, from hunger and thirst, and from the fatigues of our long journey. None but ourselves will ever know how much we suffered. When traveling, I became so weak and exhausted that I lay down by the side of the trail to rest and soon went to sleep." End of quote. Well, as he slept, Henry experienced a dream in which a stranger helped him to 3 cups of water from a hole by the side of the trail. Henry woke up, went back to sleep again, and had the same dream again. A stranger, hole on the side of the road, 3 cups of water. Well, when he woke up this time, the dream had such a deep impression on him that he kept his eyes on that side of the road, looking for that hole filled with water. And as Henry walked, sure enough, he came upon a man, a stranger, in the act of dipping up water from a hole on the right side of the trail. Henry said, "I approached him, and he dipped up and passed 3 cups of water to me from a hole on the right side of the road, just precisely as I had dreamed. I did not speak to the man, nor him to me. I thought he was a stranger, as I did not remember ever seeing him before. For it seemed to me I could see him very plain with all his features and impression of countenance, although it was dark and no moon, it being about 1 o'clock in the morning of the 20th. End of quote. Well, at first, now mind you, we're in the southern Arizona desert. Henry did not think that much about it. But the more he considered it, the more he marveled. He concluded, quote, "When I arrived at camp, I was not thirsty. I have no idea who that stranger was in the middle of the Arizona desert, in the middle of the night, but I have some idea what he was." Henry G. Boyle completed his service in the Mormon Battalion. He returned home. He married and raised a large family. Over the next 20 years, Henry G. Boyle fulfilled multiple missions in the service of the Lord and passed away in the year 1908 in Pima, Arizona. Next story. You're going to think I'm crazy, but here we go. I remember a day, and you've probably had this happen to you. I was in a hurry to get somewhere, traveling in my old mustard pickup, when I was caught by a long freight train. Slowly, that thing rolled to a stop right in front of my path on the highway. A man jumped off the car, or off the engine, and walked a few yards ahead to a switch. He grabbed a lever, yay big, and it moved a comparatively tiny section of rail just a few inches, thus enabling the monstrous train to move to a different track and change directions. Now think about that for a moment. You ever seen these little railroad switches, lever, turn it, train jumps on another track and away it goes? They're called switches. Huge trains weighing thousands of tons, and some of them today over a mile long, are able to radically change directions and end up at radically different destinations, all because of a little bitty switch and a tiny little move of just a few inches. So it is with people. The tiniest of influences, decisions, can cause the most radical of changes in people's lives, leading them to totally different destinations and different courses. may I share a personal experience. Now, this was a long time ago. Many years ago, close now 45, I was asked to give a family home evening lesson to my friends and college roommates. Now, you would think that's harmless enough, but I was a brand new member of the church. I'm not even sure what family home evening was all about. I'd only recently been baptized, and even more recently had begun to seriously consider the existence of God, let alone teach someone else about Him. I was 18. I knew nothing about God, had very little of a testimony. Never in my life to that point had I taught any kind of a lesson, nor given any manner of a public speech. I didn't have the slightest idea what to say or what to do, not even the format of what a lesson was supposed to be. I was intimidated by all those returned missionaries and seminary graduates in my home evening group. I was scared to death. Well, I don't remember who. Someone shoved a teaching manual in my hand and said, "Here, just follow this." Oh, sure. As if it's that easy. Well, I did. I didn't have any other recourse. Now, here we were on the night. All my friends and roommates gathered in my apartment on Monday night to hear pitiful little me expound the mysteries of the kingdom. I began as the manual told me. It came to a place where I was instructed by the manual to ask my audience a question. So I did. But no one answered. They just sat there looking down at the floor. Awkward silence. I waited. I didn't know what else to do. And finally, in cowboy frustration, I blurted out, "Come on, you guys, answer me." They looked so shocked, but it woke them up. They answered me. They came to life, all of them. And in a matter of minutes, a marvelous gospel discussion ensued. And I'm sure, looking back, that I just sat there and smiled and nodded and called on people and had no clue what they were talking about. But it was a great lesson. Well, when the lesson was over, a number of them came up to me and complimented me on the wonderful lesson I had taught. It might seem like a silly thing, but that night had a profound impact on me. It was the first time in my life I could remember feeling that I was actually good at something. Why? Because I believed what they told me. That's a great lesson, Glenn. You're a good teacher. Because of that experience, I always and ever after that accepted teaching opportunities that came my way. Missionary lessons, firesides by the thousands, classes, seminary, institute, radio, television, social media. I seldom ever turned down an invitation to teach or to speak. Well, that day was going on 50 years ago. You can judge for yourself how significantly that night changed the course of my life. I emphasize it again, my dear friends. Do you know your power? The influence of that tiniest compliment and recognition switched the entire course and destination of my life. I will always be grateful to those wonderful friends who still are. And now the point. Be mindful that whatever you may say to another person today could change the course of their lives for good or ill. Therefore, be wise and be kind. Last story. I might be stretching a little bit, but I don't think so. Some of you know I just got back from Hawaii. And so that's where this story comes from. Would you be closer to the Lord today? This Sunday, would you like to worship more deeply? I would. I was recently taught a principle that I will illustrate by this story. We were in Hawaii on the tour. There were 27 of us traveling about and exploring the island of Oahu. We went all over the island. We had a wonderful experience, as some of you know, not just in what we saw, but the group that we were there with. We got very close in just 8 days. This wasn't just a tour either. It was a church history tour, which means we saw not only sites that were culturally and historically significant to Hawaii, but also spiritually significant to members of the church. So, in other words, we weren't just there to learn. It wasn't academic. We were also there to be edified. Towards the last of days of our time there, I proposed to the group that we all get up early in the morning and go out on Laie Point to watch the sun come up over the Pacific. In order to make this happen, it was not going to be easy. It wasn't part of our regular itinerary. We had to get the word out, first of all, to everyone, then get all those people out of bed, arrange for the buses and the drivers to pick us up almost 2 hours earlier than the schedule, and then drive everyone out to the beach. And you would think that would be it, but no, there was more. Once there, we had to help each other navigate the rough and rocky terrain out to the point. Well, on that significant Friday morning, I came down to the lobby, and there they were, 6:45 a.m., dressed and ready to go, and cheerful, mind you. And they didn't have to. That's the key point. They didn't have to go. We packed into the vans and drove out to the point. Parking was crowded. We were not the only ones who wanted to be out there. Once unloaded, we indeed helped each other walk down to the point. It was a bit of a tough walk, uneven ground. For some folks, older ones, that was a challenge. But they did it. We got there. We got situated. We waited. And moments later, the colors burst forth, and the sun came up glorious and beautiful over Laie Bay. A lot of pictures were taken. As we watched the sun come up and the waves crashing in, the Lord visited us with His Spirit, and we shared a wonderful gospel discussion and a beautiful prayer. It was, for me, a highlight of the trip, a wonderful, edifying, memorable moment. But it would not have happened if we had not gone beyond the normal and customary itinerary. Because we made an exceptional effort, we received an exceptional blessing that we otherwise would have missed. My dear friends, you see the point? When it comes to drawing near to the Lord now, or worshiping more deeply this Sunday, I believe sometimes it's necessary to go beyond what we normally do. If sacrifice brings forth the blessings of heaven, then occasional, exceptional effort on the Sabbath, or in our prayers, or our worship practices, well, it pays off. It will bring the light of the sun, S-O-N, into our souls, the Son of Almighty God.